Hey you, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, I will be showing how I made this autumn themed deer. Now you'll notice right away that it's not the normal clips you were seeing. Normally you see me sculpting, but this is a piece I sculpted the head a while ago and I molded it in silicone and now I'm casting it in resin. And basically that just means I'm taking 2 parts of a liquid that when you mix it together it turns into a very hard plastic. Now, full disclaimer, please, if you're going to use resin, wear gloves and a respirator. I was dingus and I forgot that I ran out of gloves halfway through the day and I already had everything set up, so I was just like so I was just being very careful and not get anything on me. But you should always be wearing gloves and a respirator when working with any type of chemicals, resin. It just gives off a lot of fumes. You don't want to get a rash or have a reaction to it, so just be safe, guys. Do as I say, not as I do in this case. This art doll is sort of a callback to one I did years ago where it was like a spring themed, and so I thought it would be cool to do a fall themed one. Now you notice when I take the resin out of the mold that there's like, where's the ears? And that's because large bubbles formed, and I have this problem with this mold, so I'm probably going to have to remold it to get rid of that issue. But it's not a big deal because I'm going to end up using epoxy later on, so I'm just going to epoxy fill that in. So if you're doing a resin cast and you're like, oh my god, there's bubbles everywhere, oh my god, half of this is missing, don't panic. Just slap some epoxy on that and it'll be like it never happened. It never happened. I don't know what you're talking about. Those ears been there. What? Now you'll notice I'm marking an X where I want the antlers to go, and I'm just using a Dremel tool to kind of make a hole to where I can insert those antlers. And I'm just using branches from like Michael's, that it was like a part of like a tree thing or something, but I thought it would look really cool as antlers to give off like that kind of fall themed, it has trees coming out of its head kind of vibe. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm just securing it like very lightly with a little bit of glue because I'm going to epoxy all the way around it to really secure it in place. And so I just need the glue to hold it in long enough so that the epoxy can cure and really grip it and make sure it's not going to go anywhere. You should also be using gloves when you use epoxy. How did I run out of gloves? I don't understand. But wear gloves, okay? Yeah, wear gloves. You know, this is my first year like actually experiencing what fall is, because I lived pretty much my whole life in a desert. I'm from Arizona originally, so fall to me is like a week where it's not 120 degrees. So that's what fall is. And now I've moved to where I experience leaves changing and stuff and cold temperatures, and I'm just like, what is this? What is going on? I'm confused. I will be doing like a little sculpting if this counts, but I need to make the hooves for the deer, and since I want them to be pretty small, I don't want to make them out of clay because I don't want them to end up cracking or breaking under the strain of the wire since they'll be so small. So a good alternative is to use Instamorph, and Instamorph is just these plastic pellets that you put in really hot water, and when they melt they become very moldable, and then when they cool off they become a hard plastic again. So it's really good for things like little horns, little hooves, claws and things like that, just little details. I wouldn't do a whole sculpture out of this stuff because you can't get that level of detail, but for the little things like this it's perfect for. Once the head and feet are attached to the armature, it's time to build up the body. And for this I use quilt batting, and it's pretty much readily available anywhere. Any craft store will sell it, and it comes in these really long rolls, and I'll just cut it into strips and then wrap it around the body over and over and over again until it's built up to how I want. Now, something I always mention is you want to be aware of how thick whatever your fabric is you're going to be using is, because you don't want to build up the body as thick as you actually want it, because then when you add your fabric on it, especially for fur fabric, it's going to add a lot more thickness, and then it's going to be a body type that you no longer want. So that's something to be aware of. If you want like a very skinny boy, you have to make sure that you're not putting quite as much quilt batting, because whatever fabric you're going to add is going to add a little bit of thickness on top of that. So that's something to be aware of. But if you want that thick boy, you go for it. You get that thick boy. Also, just saying, this is your daily reminder that if you've been putting off certain art things because you think that you can't do it and that you're not good enough for it or it's too difficult, let me be the first to tell you, hey, you knock that off. Knock it off. You go do that thing. It doesn't matter how it turns out. You go enjoy yourself. You go do that art thing. You go do that clean thing that you've been putting off. You go do something that you've been putting off because you thought you couldn't do it. Like, go do it. Go do the dishes. I'm mostly telling myself that. I have to go do the dishes, but I'm putting that off. I have to take my own advice. Can we just take a second to look at my dog who jumped on my desk as I'm working just to lay on my faux fur? Like, the audacity of this doggo. I swear he is more cat than he is dog. He may just be an imposter. Dun, dun, dun. But this is your doggo break. And enjoy. Okay, I'm gonna tell you right now, you should probably watch a different video for actually how to sew an art doll, like one of my other videos, because this ain't it. I'm showing you the process anyway because this is a tutorial, I think. I needed to sew like 3 different types of fabric because I kind of wanted a gradient, but I wanted to save on me having to airbrush a bunch of it, and I had like a bunch of browns that I never used, so I was like, I'm gonna sew them all together. Well, my go for it method doesn't really work once you pass like 2 colors. Once you add like a 3rd one, it starts to get like really complicated, and it's kind of like, why don't you just do what everyone else does and just make a pattern? Because I'm stupid and a rebel, and that's too much work for me. So I'm showing you how I kind of just sewed all the different fabrics together in this jangled mess, and I made it work. It was probably a lot more difficult and took longer than to just make a pattern, but it worked. So, you know, too stupid now. But yeah, watch one of my older videos, especially if you're a beginner and you're not trying to use a lot of fabrics. It'll just be a lot easier to understand. I'm just kind of finagling this thing and making it work, and that's what we're doing. Yep. And while I am sewing, I'd like to talk about today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by friends of the channel, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for curious and creative people, being like super affordable at less than $10 a month with an annual subscription, and featuring a wide selection of classes ranging from things like fine arts, arts and crafts, photography, business, and just tons more. Skillshare has such a wide variety of classes, and there is something for everyone regardless of your skill level. If you've been wanting to learn animation, they got it. If you've been wanting to learn how to paint with watercolor, they got it. How to color grade photos for your art dolls when you're ready to sell them, they got you. You even got an art block going on? Because I know we've all been there. They even got you for that. Lately, I have actually been wanting to learn stop motion. I know a lot of you guys have been mentioning it, and I've been eager to learn it as well. I think my art dolls are going to be a perfect medium for it, and I've been taking Pez's class on stop motion, which is really cool since I used to admire his YouTube videos for like the longest time. Like, I still go back and just watch them. They're really, really good. But it's been really nice to learn from like the best of the best. So if you're interested, for a limited time, use the link in my description to get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. And thank you once again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Once the chaos of sewing is all done, it's time to trim up the body. And for this, I use a pet shaver. It is an awesome tool to have in your arsenal for trimming fur. It just gets all the bulk fur off very quickly. It does it very smoothly, and there's a bunch of different guards that you can use to get the desired length that you're going for your art dolls. It's just, if you have the extra money, I would get a pet shaver if you plan on making a bunch of art dolls, because it just makes everything so much easier and faster. Now, that being said, you definitely do not need one. I still go back with scissors to make sure that everything is exactly how I want it. I make sure I go and trim up all the legs so that all the joints are nice and prominent and it just looks how I want. Once I've trimmed everything up, it's time to airbrush, and I'm using a gravity feed airbrush, and that basically just means it's an airbrush where you pour in the paint from the top. A lot of you guys have been asking me if paint airbrushing really changes the texture of a fur. As long as you're keeping your layers light and you're making sure you're brushing in between each layer so that nothing clumps together, the texture pretty much stays the same. It's like when you start getting into really dark colors, because you're gonna have to really go heavy with that, that's when fur can kind of get clumpy and stuff. But as long as you're making sure, again, that you're staying light and you're brushing on your stuff, you should be fine. I've pretty much taught myself solely how to airbrush, which is why I'm so bad at sewing, is because I buy all my fabric in white and then I'll just airbrush everything. But we're working on it. We're working. Once all my airbrushing is done, it's time to paint all the clay pieces, or in this case, resin pieces. I'm using Folkart acrylics for all my painting, and I'm just starting with a base coat of brown. Eventually, I want to try to simulate a gradation on the head like I did for the body, and the best way I know how to do that is to do it when the paint is wet. So like, I'll have my base coat here, and then I'll start to add like darker colors around the nose, and then I'll work that way. I'll work it up towards the antlers, and then I'll go back with my base color and then start blending it all in, and then I'll come in with the light color and just do it on the opposite side where like towards the antlers I'll put all the light colors, and then I'll use my base color to kind of blend that back in with the dark. And so it's a lot of back and forth. It's kind of hard to explain. Hopefully the video is showing it a little better. It's mostly just a back and forth trying to get a smooth gradient for the head, which is what I'm going for. Once painting's done, it's time to do the next step, which is to add a bunch of little trinkets and flowers and branches and just anything I can think of onto the body. And this is just something I really love to do. I just got a bunch of different fall colors, oranges, yellows, reds, purples, anything like that, and I'm just adding them to the body. And whatever kind of fashion I want. I'm just kind of just going with the flow. And I also added little moss onto the branches of the antlers, just to trying to give off that like leaves are falling off of it because it's fall time. I thought that gave a really nice effect. But then the final touch was to actually add these little butterflies. I thought it was just a very cute little final touch. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. I know my videos tend to be pretty lengthy, but I appreciate you sticking around all the way to the end. I'd like to give a quick shout out to all my patrons. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. It's just there's not much I can say, and every time I think about it, I'm just like thank you. But thank you. Also, this creature along with a bunch of others will be available in my shop, so I will leave links to that in the description for anybody who's interested. But thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!